So if there is a damage causing a depletion in ATP supply, then that cell will have to die, will be injured irreversibly, and it will have to die. Another example leading to the cell being injured reversibly, as I mentioned earlier, the cell will be injured reversibly as long as the stressful stimuli is withdrawn and the cell is no longer under the subject of the stress, then the cell will be able to repair itself and return back to the normal state of homeostasis. Now when it comes to an irreversible injury, an irreversible injury happens because there is a damage that the cell can no longer overcome. So now there is no going back from an irreversible cell injury. The cell will have to die, and it will die by either by apoptosis, provided that the injury had nothing to do, namely with oxidative phosphorylation. This is the most important, essential, this is the number one biochemical pathway in the entirety of human physiology, because the mitochondria is responsible for the process of generating ATP, where it's called oxidative phosphorylation for a reason, because it involves oxygen. It wasn't called nitrogenous phosphorylation, because oxygen, these two oxygens, O2 is two oxygens, this double bond between the two oxygens will be broken down, and this breakdown of the two bonds would release energy, and in exchange for this energy release, the electron will receive, the oxygen would receive 2 electrons, and the energy released will be used by the mitochondria to create a proton motive force and eventually to create ATP. But if there is no oxygen, we will never be able to generate that required energy to cause ATP. Now, what happens if there is no ATP? If there is no ATP, that means all the enzymes running the essential mechanisms and biochemical pathways of life will fail, because all of them, virtually all of them require ATP, and there's also active membrane transport. There are channels like the sodium-potassium ATPase that require ATP to work. So in the absence of ATP, these active membrane transport channels will fail, and the isoosmotic gradient will be broken, and the concentration gradient required for the initiation of an action potential will no longer be there. The water will flow down in concentration gradient, causing cellular swelling, causing the appearance of lipid vacuoles, and causing cell death. So we have to understand that when it comes to cell death, as long as the oxidative phosphorylation process is not affected, the cell will die by apoptosis. But if the oxidative phosphorylation process is impaired, that would lead to death, and death via necrosis. Because since there is no ATP, how will the pro-apoptotic enzymes be able to carry out this programmed cell death that is positive and good for preventing the initiation of inflammation? That's as far as oxidative phosphorylation. Another concept that we must discuss is that the stimulus that causes the cell injury will target either the mitochondria or will cause endoplasmic reticulum stress, or it will cause damage to the lysosomal membrane or cause damage to the mitochondrial DNA or damage to the nuclear DNA or damage to the plasma membrane. But we will talk about these concepts. For now, let's first have an understanding of what homeostasis means. قطعت